The Galactic Survival Council had spent centuries perfecting the ultimate test of endurance, intelligence, and adaptability. Known simply as the Survival Course, it was designed to push the limits of any species that dared to enter. It was a simulated death world, an artificial nightmare crafted from the deadliest elements of the harshest planets in the galaxy. Every species that attempted it needed at least 100 years to reach the final stage, passing down survival knowledge through generations. No one had ever completed it alone. No one had ever done it in a single lifetime. It was a challenge designed to break the unbreakable. And then, the humans arrived. The Galactic Union had only recently accepted humans into their ranks, still uncertain whether these creatures from a so-called death world deserved a place among civilized species. They were fragile, biologically inefficient compared to the stronger, longer-lived, or more energy-efficient races. Yet, they had a reputation for being dangerously unpredictable, capable of achieving the impossible when pushed to their limits. So, when a small human team volunteered to attempt the survival course, the council couldn't help but laugh. "Let them try," one of the council members had said with amusement. "They'll beg to be removed before the first year is over." With that, the humans were transported into the simulation, a vast, ever-changing landscape filled with extreme temperatures, shifting terrain, deadly predators, and environmental hazards designed to grind down even the strongest warriors. The moment the simulation started, the Galactic Council settled in to watch what they assumed would be a quick disaster. But within the first hour, something felt wrong. The humans didn't panic. They didn't stumble through the thick jungle in fear like other species. They didn't waste time analyzing every detail before moving forward. Instead, they adapted instantly. Within minutes, they split into teams, moving with a level of efficiency that sent a chill through the council members. One group scouted the area, quickly identifying threats and resources. Another team set up rudimentary shelters using fallen branches and vines, creating a defensive perimeter without hesitation. Within an hour, they had already built their first fire, something that had taken other species decades to accomplish in this simulation. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. "They're just getting lucky," one of them muttered. "Wait until the real challenges begin." But luck had nothing to do with it.as. The simulated night fell, bringing freezing temperatures and aggressive nocturnal predators. The council prepared for the moment when the humans would finally crack. The usual pattern was predictable. Participants would struggle against the cold, attempt to fend off an attack, and either die or flee into the wilderness, delaying their progress for years. The humans, however, were prepared. They had already anticipated the cold, setting up heat-reflecting shelters made from available materials, sealing off openings with thick layers of vegetation. When the predators arrived, instead of retreating in fear, the humans fought back. With makeshift spears, they turned the ambush into a trap, killing the first wave of creatures with terrifying precision. Instead of struggling to survive the night, they thrived in it.by morning. They had skinned the predators for warmth, stored the meat for later use, and mapped out a plan to move forward. The council was stunned. It didn't make sense. Every other species had required years to figure out the basics of survival in the simulation. These humans had done it in a single night. This shouldn't be possible," an insectoid council member whispered in disbelief. But the horror had only just begun. As the second day progressed, the simulation increased its difficulty. The terrain shifted, replacing the dense jungle with endless desert, a cruel sun beating down on the humans with relentless heat. Other species had required generations to develop resistance to the dehydration and heat exhaustion that this environment inflicted. But the humans? They just adjusted. "We need to conserve water," one of them said, immediately devising a method to extract moisture from underground. Another used their clothing to protect against the sun, covering exposed skin while staying cool. They moved quickly but efficiently, maintaining energy without wasting unnecessary effort. When the simulation generated a sandstorm, meant to scatter them and break their morale, the humans hunkered down, waiting it out without fear. The council members began to panic. "Something is wrong with the system," a reptilian scientist hissed, frantically checking the simulation's programming. It shouldn't be this easy for them. But the system was working perfectly. The problem wasn't the simulation. The problem was the human screechers. Even attempting the course, now watched in horror as the humans tore through every obstacle, like it was a minor inconvenience. They aren't just surviving, an elder council member finally spoke in a hushed, trembling voice. They are winning. And for the first time in the history of the Galactic Survival Course, the test itself seemed afraid. The Galactic Council sat in stunned silence, their multiple eyes, lenses, and sensory organs locked onto the holographic display showing the human team inside the survival simulation. No species had ever reached this level of progress in less than a century. Yet here were the humans, barely a day into the test, moving with a terrifying level of efficiency. What was meant to be an impossible challenge had turned into something else entirely, a demonstration of the Death World advantage. The simulation had been designed with the harshest conditions imaginable. Each biome was carefully crafted from the most hostile planets in the known galaxy, filled with apex predators, extreme weather patterns, and environmental hazards that tested the limits of biology. The entire purpose of the test was to force species to adapt over generations, to struggle, suffer, and evolve in the face of nature's cruelty. But the humans were different. They weren't adapting over generations. They were adapting in real time. The next phase of the simulation was meant to slow them down, a vast tundra stretching for thousands of kilometers, where food was scarce, temperatures dropped far below freezing, and the wind howled like a living beast. Most species took decades just to figure out how to sustain themselves in such conditions. The humans? They saw it as a new challenge to overcome. Within minutes of arriving in the tundra, they moved without hesitation. They used the remains of the creatures they had hunted in the jungle, fashioning thick fur-lined clothing for warmth. One of them grabbed a sharp stone and started chiseling at the ice, finding fresh water below the frozen surface. Another group built an insulated shelter using only snow and windbreaks, a technique so efficient that even the council's engineers took notes. When the holographic predators, massive, six-legged beasts designed to hunt in packs, attacked, the humans didn't panic. They didn't run. They set a trap. The council watched in horror as the predators fell one by one, ambushed by the very prey they were supposed to be hunting. The humans had anticipated the attack before it even happened, studying the movements of the creatures, baiting them into the deep snow, and striking with perfect coordination. Within hours, they had fresh food, warm fur, and weapons made from the creatures' remains. "This isn't possible," a reptilian council member hissed, his scales darkening with stress. "The cold alone should have slowed them down." "Their fragile bodies are not fragile," another alien interrupted, her voice a mixture of disbelief and growing fear. "Look at their biology reports. These creatures were born on a world filled with extreme temperatures, shifting landscapes, and constant danger. Their world was trying to kill them before they even learned to walk. Compared to Earth, this simulation is nothing but a mild inconvenience." The realization sent a chill through the council chamber. The humans were built for this. Their home world, classified as a Category 12 death world, was already harsher than most of the challenges in the simulation. The only reason they'd been underestimated was because no one had ever imagined that a species could thrive in chaos. Every other species that had entered this test came from stable worlds, where survival was a slow process of adaptation. Humans had evolved in a place where the environment was constantly changing, where they had to outthink, outrun, and outfight every threat to survive. And now, they were proving that they were not like the others. The simulation responded by increasing its difficulty. The tundra shifted, splitting apart into jagged cliffs and deep ravines. The wind doubled in speed, creating a whiteout that rendered vision almost useless. The predators grew more aggressive, faster, stronger. Any other species would have been crippled by fear. The humans? They laughed. Finally, one of them muttered, pulling their fur-lined hood tighter. "I was getting bored." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. Who were these creatures? Why weren't they afraid? The answer came when the humans started moving toward the storm instead of away from it. "They're using it," an avian observer whispered in shock. "They're using the wind to cover their movements." It was true. Instead of fighting against nature, the humans had become part of it. They let the storm cloak their advance, moving unseen through the blizzard. They hunted in the worst possible conditions, striking when the predators were weakest. They used fire, ice, and instinct to carve their path forward. By the time the storm passed, the humans had not only survived, they had conquered. The Galactic Council was no longer watching an experiment. They were watching the rise of something new, something dangerous. The simulation had been meant to prove which species could endure the impossible. Instead, it had exposed a terrifying truth: the humans didn't just survive. They dominated. "Shut it down," one of the council leaders ordered, his voice filled with panic. Shut the simulation down. But it was too late. The humans had already reached the next biome, a volcanic wasteland filled with rivers of lava and poisonous gases. Instead, hesitating, one of them grinned, cracking their knuckles as they stared at the new challenge ahead. "All right," the human said. "Let's see what else this thing has." And for the first time in galactic history, the universe itself seemed to tremble at the thought of what humans would do next. The Galactic Council had seen many terrifying things in their time: planets consumed by war, civilizations crumbling under their own ambition, entire species wiped out by their own creations. But nothing compared to the fear growing in their hearts as they watched the humans inside the survival course. What was meant to be the ultimate endurance test, a challenge spanning an entire century, had become something else entirely. It was no longer a test of survival. It was a test of how fast the humans could break it. The simulation had thrown everything at them: unforgiving deserts, frozen wastelands, and predator-infested jungles. Each phase had been designed to push species to their absolute limits, forcing them to evolve and adapt over generations. But the humans had ignored the rules. They had torn through each challenge as if it were a simple exercise, turning death traps into training grounds. Now, with only a single day passed in real time, they had already entered the final stage, a volcanic hellscape designed to be impassable. Rivers of molten rock cut through jagged mountains, spewing toxic fumes into the sky. Violent earthquakes shattered the ground every few minutes, while the air itself was so thick with poison that no species had ever survived here for more than a few hours. The humans? They were already figuring out how to use it to their advantage. One of them crouched near a bubbling pool of lava, holding out a strange metallic tool. "All right," he muttered, adjusting a dial on his wrist device. "This should work." The other humans stood back as he lowered a small chunk of metal into the lava. Within seconds, the extreme heat melted it into a glowing liquid. The humans exchanged grins. "Perfect. We can use this to reinforce our gear," one of them said. The council chamber fell into chaos. "WHATARETHEYDOING? An insectoid scientist screeched, his wings trembling in horror. "They're using the lava to create tools," another alien whispered in shock. This wasn't survival. This was engineering. The simulation had been designed to punish those who stayed too long in one place. The air was supposed to be too toxic to breathe, the heat too unbearable to withstand. But the humans had found ways around every problem. They wrapped damp cloth around their faces to filter out the worst of the gases. They used the warmth from underground vents to create natural heating zones, protecting themselves from the cold nights. Instead of avoiding the lava, they studied it, testing which rocks were the strongest, which minerals could be useful. And then the first explosion happened. The simulation's code struggled to process the speed of human progress. It wasn't meant to handle this level of adaptation. The system began breaking down. The volcanic activity became more violent. The AI controlling the test was panicking. "The system is failing." A technician in the council chamber yelled. "They're moving too fast." The simulation responded by activating emergency protocols. The humans, still completely unaware of the growing fear in the council, suddenly noticed something change. The sky darkened unnaturally, thick black clouds forming at a speed that shouldn't have been possible. A deep rumbling shook the ground beneath their feet. From the distance, something massive began rising, a towering creature, its molten skin dripping with fire, eyes glowing like miniature suns. The humans stared at it for a moment. Then, one of them sighed. "Well," he said, cracking his knuckles, That's new. The Galactic Council watched in horror as the final boss of the simulation emerged. This monster had been created as a last resort measure, something so powerful that any species still alive by this stage would be forced to flee. It was an unstoppable force, a creature designed to bring absolute destruction. The humans, however, did not run. One of them adjusted his gear. Another rolled his shoulders. The leader of the group simply smirked, and then they attacked. The council chamber erupted into pure panic. They're fighting it? A reptilian general gasped. They're supposed to be running. But they weren't running. The humans had already figured out the monster's weaknesses. While the other species before them had cowered, humans had studied it. They had predicted its movement patterns, understood the way the lava shifted around its body, and identified the smallest gaps in its armor. The battle didn't last long. The humans outmaneuvered the beast, dodging its attacks with terrifying speed. They struck at its weak points with weapons they had crafted from the very world meant to kill them. It roared, shaking the very foundation of the simulation. But the humans did not stop. They fought like creatures born for war, dodging, striking, adapting, overcoming. And then the system crashed. The holographic screens inside the council chamber flickered, warnings flashing across every monitor. The AI tried to correct the errors, but the humans had moved too fast. The simulation's processing power wasn't designed to handle a species that refused to follow the rules. The ground beneath the humans vanished. The world around them collapsed. The entire simulation shut down, and just like that, the test was over. Silence filled the chamber. The impossible had happened. The humans had beaten the game. One of the technicians in the council finally spoke in a whisper. They broke it. They broke the simulation. The council members could only watch as the humans were forcefully ejected from the test, landing back in the real world, completely unharmed. Instead of looking confused or afraid, they simply stretched, adjusting their gear. One of them let out a satisfied sigh. That was fun, he said. Do we get to do another round? A cold wave of fear passed through the chamber. For centuries, the Galactic Council had thought of the survival course as the ultimate test. But now they realized the truth. It hadn't been a test for the humans. It had been a warm-up, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Galactic Council's observation chamber was silent, a silence filled with growing terror. The finest minds of the universe, the most powerful leaders, the most advanced scientists, all frozen as they watched the screens before them. What they were witnessing should have been impossible. It should have been a lesson in humility for the humans, a demonstration of why the Galactic Union stood at the peak of civilization. Instead, it had become something else entirely. The humans weren't losing. They were winning. The experiment had been designed as a demonstration of ultimate survival, a test meant to showcase how truly superior the Union's most elite warriors were. A vast artificial world had been constructed, filled with every conceivable danger. Hostile weather, starvation, deadly creatures, and labyrinthine terrain, every variable had been precisely calculated to make survival a near impossibility. Even the best-trained species barely lasted a few months. Most competitors barely made it past the first week. But the humans? They had adapted in mere hours. The Council's leading scientists had watched as the humans entered the simulation with an unsettling confidence. They did not hesitate when they encountered unknown terrain. They did not panic when faced with deadly creatures 3 times their size. They did not even seem concerned when their rations ran out. They adapted. With a precision that was almost unnatural, they worked together, navigating the terrain, setting traps, crafting weapons, and securing food as if it were routine. By the second day, they had already done what took others years to accomplish. "This is unacceptable," muttered High Chancellor Varkov, his scaled hands tightening into fists. His species, the mighty Drakva, were known as the most fearsome warriors in the galaxy. He had expected to see the humans humbled, struggling to survive. Instead, he was watching them thrive. They should be struggling, spurred another council member, a gelatinous being whose form constantly shifted in distress. This test is meant to push species to the brink of extinction, to force them into desperation. And yet, the humans were laughing. On the screens, the Deathworlders sat around a fire, sharing stories, grinning as they cooked their food, relaxing, as if they weren't in the most hostile environment ever created by the greatest minds in the galaxy. As if this was nothing more than a weekend adventure. They're not treating this like a survival scenario, one of the council's top analysts said, his voice filled with disbelief. They're treating it like a game. The words sent a wave of unease through the chamber. A game? The very concept was unthinkable. The council leaders had long assumed that humanity's rapid rise in the galactic stage had been due to luck, or perhaps their sheer recklessness. But now, watching them navigate this impossible challenge, a terrifying realization dawned upon the observers. This wasn't luck. This was who they were. Humans had evolved on a death world, a planet of endless chaos. Unlike other species who had developed in stable environments, humanity had risen on a world that was constantly trying to kill them. They had adapted not over millennia, but in real time. Every storm, every predator, every disaster had forged them into something unstoppable. And now, the council was seeing it firsthand. One of the scientists tried to stabilize his shaking tendrils. "Increase the difficulty," he ordered. "We must remind them who controls this test." A technician hesitated. "But, sir, the test is already at increase it." The simulation responded instantly. The skies darkened as a massive superstorm rolled in, winds screaming like tortured souls. The temperature dropped to lethal levels, frost forming over everything in seconds. The wildlife became even more aggressive, their programming altered to attack without mercy. The humans? They welcomed it. Lightning flashed across the screens as the storm crashed into the landscape, but instead of seeking shelter in fear, the humans raced toward it. They wrapped their bodies in makeshift insulation, dug trenches to block the wind, and started using the storm's energy to their advantage. While other species would have collapsed in panic, the humans used the chaos to hunt, taking down creatures even stronger than themselves. The council chamber erupted into confusion. What are they doing? They should be retreating. Instead, the humans pushed forward, cutting through obstacles as if they were mere inconveniences. The simulation was no longer testing them. They were testing it. Wasn't long before the first system failure appeared. The AI managing the environment tried to keep up, but the humans were moving too fast, changing their strategies before the system could react. The calculations collapsed under the strain. The simulation's balance broke. The ground beneath the humans glitched, the environment struggling to keep up with their unnatural progress. The AI tried one final desperate measure, activating the ultimate threat. A titanic creature emerged from the depths, a horror of pure malice. It had been designed as an invincible force, a final guardian meant to wipe out any survivors who made it too far. It towered over the humans, each of its monstrous limbs capable of reducing them to dust. The Galactic Council leaned forward in anticipation. Finally, the humans would learn fear. And then the leader of the human group grinned. One of them stretched his arms. Another cracked his knuckles. They were excited. The fight lasted 10 minutes. The beast never stood a chance. With a mix of brutal efficiency and creativity, the humans tore it apart. They used fire, they used terrain, they used teamwork in ways the simulation had never prepared for. In mere minutes, the unstoppable creature was nothing more than a corpse. Then the screens went black. Total system collapse. The chamber was dead silent. The simulation had failed. The test had failed. The galaxy's greatest challenge had been shattered. And the humans? They stood in the middle of the broken world, looking around in mild disappointment. "That's it?" one of them muttered. "I thought it'd be harder." In the observation chamber, the council leaders sat in stunned horror. Everything they had believed about the universe had just been rewritten. The humans hadn't just survived the test. They had broken it. And the worst part? They weren't even tired. The Galactic Council had always considered humans to be a curiosity and anomaly in the grand order of the universe. They were a species that had risen from a death world, a planet so violent and unpredictable that no rational being would ever call it home. And yet, despite this, humanity had thrived. They had spread across the stars, integrating into the greater galactic community with unsettling ease. Many believed their success was due to luck. Others thought it was due to their reckless nature. But today, the Council was witnessing something that shattered all their previous assumptions. It had started as a simple test. The Council had gathered in their grand observation chamber to oversee the Great Trial, a test meant to measure the true strength of a species. The trial was not meant for humans. It had been created to test only the most elite warriors in the galaxy. Those who passed became legends, their names forever etched in history. The challenges were insurmountable: an endless desert with no water, an ocean filled with creatures that could tear through steel, a jungle where even the plants were carnivorous. The final stage was a hunting ground, where the greatest predators in the known universe roamed. No species had ever completed the full trial. Not one. And yet, the humans had stepped forward. At first, the Council had laughed at their arrogance. Now they sat in horrified silence. The desert, which had claimed thousands of warriors, was no challenge for the humans. While others had struggled, collapsing under the sun, humans moved like they belonged there. They found water where there was none. They rationed their energy, traveled by night, and used the very environment against itself. They did not just survive, they thrived. The ocean had been even more terrifying. Creatures with razor-sharp teeth, monstrous things that lurked in the depths, waiting to tear apart anything that entered their domain. Other species had barely made it across. The humans? They hunted the monsters. The Council had watched in disbelief as a group of humans dove into the water willingly, weapons in hand. Within hours, they had learned the creatures' weaknesses. By the end of the day, they were riding them. "This isn't possible," one of the Council members muttered. "They're supposed to be struggling." But they weren't. The jungle, the place where no being had lasted more than a few hours, became a playground for the humans. The plants that had consumed other warriors were harvested for medicine. The creatures that had once been feared, trapped and tamed. "They're not just surviving," an insectoid scientist whispered, his antennae trembling. "They're learning." By the time the humans reached the final challenge, the Council was afraid. The hunting ground had been designed as the ultimate test. No weapons, no technology, only instinct and willpower. The humans had been expected to run, to hide, to fear. Instead, they became the hunters. The apex predators, creatures that had reigned over this place for millennia, fell one by one. The humans studied them, analyzed their weaknesses, set traps, and worked together in ways the simulation had never accounted for. The great beasts that had once been unstoppable forces of nature became prey. And then the system broke. The AI controlling the test malfunctioned, unable to process what it was witnessing. The trial was never meant to be beaten. It had been designed to prove that no species could truly master the untamed forces of nature. But humanity had not only conquered every challenge, they had rewritten the rules. The Council chamber was in chaos. "They've completed it," one of the engineers whispered, staring at the final screen. No one was supposed to complete it. For the first time in history, the Great Trial had been conquered. But the humans weren't celebrating. As they emerged from the final challenge, victorious, they weren't exhausted or wounded. They were calm, focused, calculating. It was then that the Council realized the true horror. This had not been a test for the humans. It had been practice. "Do you see now?" a voice whispered. It belonged to an older member of the Council, a species long-lived and wise. His multiple eyes were filled with something akin to dread. The others turned to him, silent. "This is their power," he continued. "Not their strength, not their weapons, but their minds." The room fell into a heavy silence. Humanity had passed the test, not because they were the strongest, but because they had adapted. Where others had seen obstacles, they had seen opportunities. Where others had hesitated, they had learned. "They are not like us," the old Council member murmured. "We prepare for danger. They become it." And as the humans,